Hello, Thayer.
It's great to have you here.
It is very great to be here. I have enjoyed every single second of being on this campus.
If I could start off with a point of quick controversy.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So there are a few Celtics fans in the
Oh,
audience.
yeah.
And I think they may be wondering the genesis of that. How you might want to explain.
Okay. Well, see, I was telling Mr. Fortunato that I used to wear this Chicago Bears hat with the bear on it. You know, a really beautiful embroidered bear because I liked the bear. And people would say, "Oh, a Bears fan? Bears fan?" I say, "Oh no, I like the bear." And then I realized after a certain amount of time, I'm wearing this hat. I have no connection to this team whatsoever. And so I thought, well, I'm not a sports fan, so I can't. But I have to wear it. I want the fashion. So I realized that I had to wear teams from my hometown. So I'm a San Francisco native, and so this is my team because that's by guilt by association.
There you are.
So it's nothing personal.
Well, I'm so excited to ask you a number of questions that members of our community have been thinking of. I told a student earlier, I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to channel my inner Johnny Carson.
Oh boy! Do you not usually do this?
No. Not sometimes. But the best part of that was they're like, who? Just reminding us that some of our youngest students were born in 2014.
You used the wrong name.
Okay.
You should have said,
Stephen Colbert.
Yeah. Jimmy, what's his name? One of the Jimmys.
One of the Jimmys, right? Okay, there's a few Jimmys. So can we start with, typically when people meet one another, it's names, right? What's your name? Tell me about your name. And we saw a little bit in the clip there about at one point in your life, you were, make sure you get Bradley Darrell Wong.
Yes.
And then you became BD. How does that happen?
Well, it happened because I really, it was explained kind of well in the thing. I was playing this big role in a big Broadway show that kind of took off. And part of the shtick of that show was that the character, one of the two characters in the play, discovers deep into the play that the character that he's been in love with for 20 years is not a woman but a man. Now, this is in 1988 when that was a big deal, when people cared about the tension of gender and all of that stuff, which is lessened considerably.
Sure. Yeah.
Not gone away completely, but lessened. And so the producer asked me if I would be B. Wong in the program to disguise or to not have a gender attached to my name, and I thought that was fine. But my father actually, his nickname was BD. My brothers and I all have the same, and my dad all have the same initials, and so all of us are BD. And so it meant it was more meaningful to me to be BD than to be. And I thought at the time it doesn't matter whether it is one or the other. I'm just going to go back to being Brad at the end.
Okay.
When it's all over, because it'll just go back to being Brad, and that didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And so then I went through a period of time where I had two names, and I didn't like that at all. So I kind of committed to this name, and I stuck with it and went to the DMV and changed my records.
Okay.
And all that, yeah.
And what do your parents call you?
My mom calls me BD sometimes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It's one of those things when she's mad at you.
Yeah. So this all happened, hard to say, in the last century, the last millennium, right?
Yeah.
So Bradley Darrell Wong in the late 1980s, as opposed to BD Wong in 2024. Who is that person? How is that person different?
Wow.
I know it's a long, maybe.
Well, first thing that comes to mind, I came out in 2003. I had written a book about the birth of my son, and I was going on a book tour, and I realized that this meant I was coming out. I kind of naively thought, we write a book about your family and your, all these wonderful, warm, fuzzy things. And by the way, I'm gauging myself every day, but I didn't realize that I was sharing myself in that way, and that was a big deal. And in fact, I used to, I've done this visiting schools and colleges and universities and corporations and being a public speaker for a good 30 years now, a good amount of time, many decades, and enjoyed it very much. And I began with a very prepared speech in a Itoya presentation binder where you put the papers in the little sleeves and stood behind the lectern. And in 2003, 2004, I stopped doing that. I started speaking off the cuff. I had come out, and I literally came out from behind the podium to start just walking around with a lav mic on and just talking, because I no longer had anything to edit. And that was an incredible, that is my selling point for the question of whether or not someone should come out. You know, this idea that, oh my gosh, my body released itself. I had no more editing to do at that point. And since then, I have enjoyed a whole second half of a speaking career in which I can be much more spontaneous.
Yeah, it's in the world in which we're living right now, I think it's in some ways easier and harder for kids to be authentic. You know, I think there's more tolerance, there's more conversation about a variety of topics that were lesser talked about in years past. And also you're on display for the entire world every minute of every day. So I'm wondering if you can sort of speak to, like, when you think about being your authentic self and any advice you have for students in 2024 with all the joys and challenges associated with that.
Yeah, and we touched on this in this preliminary little meet and greet I had with some of the students earlier, that this idea that what comes with the fame or the notoriety, the visibility is a sense of not being and having anywhere to hide. The privacy becomes a very fine line. You have to be very careful. Even things like having 2 Facebook accounts, because you have a Facebook account with all your friends and family on it, and you share personal, intimate things and birthdays and things like that, and then a fan Facebook account.
Sure.
You learn to kind of negotiate these things. I find it more and more positive. I find the acknowledging of one's own voice and one's own ability to create conversation and discussion is a part of being a storyteller that I connected with when I was in high school and I did my first musical. I thought I was interested in the excitement of applause and stuff like that, and I was. But what it really was is a conduit, a gateway to sharing the human truth in all of its infinite kind of manifestations, and allowing that discussion that can arise from it, whether it comes from the author of a play or musical, or it comes from a conversation that's real, in real time, as a celebrity. What is that? My Uno Pizza acting. It comes from, that is a thing that is much more interesting to me now than it was when I was a student in high school.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like the progression of that to now my examination of a script or a project is related to what am I really illuminating or creating a discussion for, or creating a visibility for that wasn't there before.
Yeah. When you think about, so we talked about some things that have certainly changed in the last number of years. Can you think about things that have not changed with you? When you think about the kind of person you were when you were in high school, and the things that have always stayed the same, whether it's your values or things that have been important to you? I
was also talking to the students before about how I'm terribly addicted to like getting into fights on social media with people.
Oh no!
And I'm unable to let go. And that's a kind of way that I like having the last word. I like articulating debate and engaging people and calling them out and all that stuff. And when you are a celebrity, whatever you want to call what it is that I am, you find yourself not being able to be a normal person. Like, any of my non-celebrity friends can go and terrorize someone on their Threads account for calling them out for being transphobic or something like that. And I do it, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, look, BD Wong's here. Okay. Comments. Look at that. Isn't that interesting? And then that becomes a whole thing.
Yeah. Because it gets on TV or it gets on...
Well, it could. I mean, I don't think I'm quite famous enough for that, but if I was Nicole Kidman, you imagine. And then part of me likes the tension of that. Part of me likes, you know what, this is my life. I will deal with it when cancellation rears its ugly head. I will be there to say, I stand my ground, I'm doubling down, I deserve the right to be a troll just like the rest of you.
So you talked just a little about your experience in high school. So we're on this wonderful stage where you got a chance to see some of our performers, and there'll be more performers in the next number of months here. This for a lot of students is the birthplace of their love of performing, or it's the next step in their love of performing. So can you talk a little bit about when you discovered that love and that passion back in high school?
I can't without crying, but I can. And also about crying. It's really on it.
Always.
Well, I mean, what's I going to say? Like, I'm going to kill you for showing me that number and making me so emotionally vulnerable, because, of course, every project you've done, every song you've ever sung creates a treasure trove of memories, and those memories come flooding back to you, and it's great. And for me, it's such an incredible part of the life journey, right? So I have what you've just given me, that wonderful trip down memory lane from that song, and then also this, prompting me to talk about the larger, even further back, which was my discovery in high school that I was an actor. I had studied music, and I was a young singer in the elementary school chorus, and those were outlets to performance that were sanctioned by my parents, that I leaned into because it was a form of performance. But I didn't know until I was in high school, and I was in the class of where a teacher came in and was recruiting orchestra musicians for the orchestra for the school musical. I didn't know until my friend who was auditioning for this show said, "Oh no, you don't want to play in the orchestra pit. The action is not in the orchestra pit. The action is on the stage." And you need to come and try out with me to this thing. And I was so secretly grateful she made me do it. She was a young actor whose parents had a community theater that did You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown later, and I was in it, and I played Linus in that too. That was my second time playing Linus in You're a Good Man, my first time playing Linus in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Anyway, I discovered very soon, through the enthusiasm of my teacher and her nurturing of my talent that was very, unrefined. It was just so raw.
Do you remember her name, Bella?
Oh, Zora Chanis, yes. Zora Chanis is she's I realize now, and part of the reason why I'm kind of in this, so comfortable and so full of joy in this kind of environment, is this idea of the mentor and the legacy of the mentor. And I'm always drawing on the relationship between my high school drama teacher and how it was life-changing to me, and how my her investment in me and her faith in me and her willingness to kind of go, what do you call it, to the mat for me. She talked to my parents. She kind of talked to my parents about the viability of me being an actor when none of us really knew what it really meant or whether it was a bad or good idea at all. But she said, you need to kind of find out, is what she said. And she unlocked for me, all the inhibitions about it, the things that are naturally a part of our life as we go through the path of deciding what it is that we're ultimately going to do, and getting all caught up in the details and the tension of practicality, of passion, of our parents' wishes, of so many variables that are swirling around and creating this kind of storm around us. And she kind of cut through some of that for me and my family, and recognized that I had this potential and forbade me to ignore it. She was really kind of dramatic about it. She was a very dramatic lady.
It's the right role for her.
Yes, she was a very Auntie-Mame-like character. She was a very flamboyant dresser. She was very loud. She cried at every dress rehearsal when we were misbehaving, and said, "This is the last time I'm doing this." And did it she did it twice a year, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And she spent her own money, and I wore her clothes, and it was endless, her commitment to the whole department, and specifically to me. To the point where just to say very briefly, I went to college and I was so spoiled by her attention and her faith in me. And I went into a theater department in the college that I went to that ignored me and was dismissive of me, to the point that when I experienced that, I knew it was wrong.
Okay.
I was able to say from the confidence that she had built up in me as a high school student and the skills that she had taught me, I knew they were making a huge mistake. I couldn't do anything about it. And I think there was a little bit of race at play. I was not a conventionally castable person, or so they thought. She didn't care about that. She gave me all the great parts and all the great musicals, and kind of kind of jiggered what all the students' talents were that were her seniors, for example, my senior year, kind of figured out, well, what show should I do for these particular kids as an educator, right? As a person that saw potential and wanted people to work on certain things or whatever. And there was none of that in the program that I was in college. So I left college. And I don't recommend it. That's all I'm saying it. But I was in a very particularly interesting predicament that was informed by what I learned about myself when I was in high school.
And did you stay in touch with her as well?
I did, and she died very young, which is of great, always like such a sadness to me. And but we did keep in touch. She came to see my Broadway debut, and she was, as they say, quelling, and she was just great. Yeah.
So when you think about, we talked about someone who inspired you when you were younger. When you think about who inspires you now, and maybe in a sort of broad kind of sense, whether as a performer or as an activist or a human being who makes you want to be a better person, who are those people now for you?
Wow. I think I'm all over the place with that question. I mean, in other words, I think there's not one person who's the answer to it. The first thing that came to mind, especially in conjunction with my colleague and friend Teresa, who is your alum and who created Nora from Queens with Aquafina, is this sense of a younger generation. And me kind of making my way through the world and having a perspective that's getting long now, it's kind of, I've been in this business for a long time.
Sure.
And gaining perspective about the journey of us, particularly as Asian Americans, through the course of the trials and tribulations of being a person of color in this business, and what it can and cannot do for you, and how much of a struggle it can be. And to then be inspired by this new wave of energy that came from not just Nora herself, but Bowen Yang, and from Teresa. This is a sense of new energy and possibilities and people being themselves. I think I became a character actor because it was not an option for me to be myself. I think when I look back, it's a sad truth that I couldn't just be a short leading man or any particular slot. Yeah. So I learned to be a chameleon. I liked being a chameleon, and I developed a talent for playing different kinds of character parts. And that has served me well to a certain extent. I long to have more of a responsibility in a project, to have a leading roles, etc. Sure. But I see the younger performers and writers, first of all, they're right for themselves, and I aspire to do that, and I do that for myself, and I've learned how to do that. It's partly a survival instinct, yeah. But I also see them being themselves, and the concept of being oneself is so fundamental to happiness, right? And that goes back to coming out. Bowen Yang is an incredible role model for me, a much younger person than me, but I find his freedom and his ability to be himself and to be unapologetic about it and to lean into it contagious, and people have responded to him because of that authenticity. And I I don't think I'm envious of it, but I covet that. I think, wow, that's what I want. I want to continue to explore the core of my authentic being. Well, that sounds so corny. But, you know, to try to mine that. We should all be doing that. We should all be going through the day, being able to be exactly who we are. And it's not easy.
Yeah. And sometimes corny is corny because it's real.
Yes, that's right.
And, right? And
I like corny, actually. I'm a big fan of corny. I apologize for it all the time because I think of what other people think about it, but I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. My dad was a very corny person, was always crying, was always making a toast at somebody's wedding whom he hardly even knew. And he was just great. And so I channel a lot of him sometimes.
Well, so consistent with who we are as a school too. I tell people all the time, we want our students to be the people that they are and aspire to be, not the people they think we want them to be.
Yes. And I don't think I even could even understand the concept of that when I was high school age. Yeah. I think being who you are, who are you? Did you know who you are? I mean, the question, I think I avoided the question at all. I don't think we were having that discussion at those times in the way that we are now. And that sense of individuality that I see conservative people, that's a buzzword, isn't it? That I see more narrow-minded people pushing away the idea that someone can be themselves.
Yeah.
The whole idea of a trans person, well, you know, it freaks people out. But that's the person being who they are. Can we just let it be that?
Sure. Being
who you are. Well, no one knows better than you who you are. So then you should be that. And everyone should be able to be okay with it. Everyone should be able to deal with it.
Yeah. When you think about, so when you're talking about character acting, I think most of our students know what it is, but we want to actually define what a character actor is.
A character actor is I like to think of a character, I mean, my definition of a character actor is a person who attempts at least, I can't say that I'm always successful, at transforming themselves in some way. That they're not using their just naked, this is a person that you've never seen me play. I mean, as sad as it is, you've never seen me play this person. I'm always playing someone who talks a certain way, or who acts a certain way, or looks a certain way, or wears a wig, or something like that. And I love that work, and I have an affinity for that work. And all I'm saying is that the reverse of it is when you put it up against this, you realize, oh, it's a totally different thing, isn't it? It's not, I don't get to play a person who's just in love with someone and talking about the nuances of their relationship. Not you know, now I'm saying be careful what you wish for, because I don't want to do that, I really do. I do think I do, you know? I do think I want to be more of a everyday human. Not all the time, not only. But that's not something that I do very much.
You still aspire to that leading man opportunity, leading role opportunity? Is that something you're still hoping for?
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. And I, you know, I've actually been specifically talking to Teresa about actually making that my opportunity happen for myself. This is what Nora and Bowen do, and I should definitely be doing that. And I have been doing that in different ways over the years. I have found a kind of what do you call it? A version of it in the theater.
Okay.
I have done a lot of plays and worked in a lot of American regional theaters, and you know, it's a very specific audience. It's not a giant nationwide kind of audience, but it is afforded me that kind of work. I've been able to do that kind of work. So I can't say I've never done that, but I would like to do it in a way in which I'm doing the project, the thing, the work, the project is culturally or politically or socially relevant. It's about something that's interesting. It's about something that makes us think or question or discuss something that's important to us all.
With all these roles, and some we showed in the clip too, when you think about one or two that were the most challenging for you to get into that character and become that person, to be so chameleon-like?
I'm really fond of White Rose in Mr. Robot because it was a very creative. I was doing Nora from Queens and White Rose at the same time, And that was really wild because they couldn't have
Different
been
roles.
more than polar opposites. And that's why I almost had to like wear wigs and stuff like that. I had to really separate them, and they had to be really different from one another. And there was one day in particular in which I, because of scheduling and because it was an impossible schedule on one show or the other, I had to shoot one of the shows in the morning and then go to the other one in the afternoon, do whatever makeup or whatever had to happen, and then shoot in that, which I don't recommend and which was really crazy and kind of schizophrenic. But the role in White Rose, the role in Mr. Robot was artistically satisfying to me, was super challenging. It allowed me to go really deep into something that I enjoyed doing and required a lot of preparation. And it was a very different process because North from Queens is wonderfully free and almost improvisational at times.
Okay.
And I loved experiencing that and leaning into that and learning as much as possible about improv comedy and stuff. And then Mr. Robot was written by an auteur, basically, who was very word exact. When you're an actor, there are different ranges of how much you are required to adhere to the text. And when you do Shakespeare, you don't mess around with the words, you don't change them. You do them exactly as Shakespeare wrote them. And you really, they take a lot of pains in a theatrical rehearsal process for you to drill the words until they're exactly the way they're read.
Sure.
And so it's frowned upon if you kind of mess around with the words. And Sam Esmail, who created Mr. Robot, was very exacting in that way. And in the two of those shows, playing off of each other was really stimulating for me. I loved that. I did like that. But it was challenging and kind of interesting, and I did love it.
I'm curious with Mr. Robot. I heard that there were a lot of plot points that were kept secret from you. And secret from everybody, right? To have big reveals on TV. How do you prepare for that when you don't know that which of you are and what you're going to be doing?
That was it's just a little high, I guess is what it is. Okay. That was the biggest challenging thing about Mr. Robot was that, and in particular, for example, I was in a scene with a young actor, and he wanted me. The direction from Sam Esmail, who's directing the episode, is I'd love you to just be a little bit more emotional. And as an actor, you really can't just be emotional in a kind of a vacuum. So I said a natural thing that you would ask, if you can kind of try to understand that you're in you're using your own emotional equipment, so you have to kind of summon it up from somewhere real, hopefully. A lot of people can fake it, but I can't. And so he said, I need you to be more emotional. I said, can you please tell me why? And he said, no, I can't tell you why. And he says, because she's gonna find out something in the next episode that is so, I forgot how he said it, but there was no explanation.
Okay.
And I struggled that day, that moment, I struggled. I thought, this isn't the job for me. How can you do this? And he had to kind of do it that way because he was very secret, hush-hush about the plot points. And he just hoped he could talk me through it. And I did a decent job with the scene, trying to give him what he wanted, but I couldn't really authentically really feel it and transport myself the way one would normally do that. And every scene in any series is only as good as you are in that moment on that day, right? So throughout the course of the shooting, you may have good days and bad days and good scenes and bad scenes. And later on in that season, no, it was the fourth season, not the third season. In the fourth season, at the very end of the fourth season, I had a huge scene that was so demanding and that I had a lot of time to work on, and that I did understand where everything was coming from. And I could feel a tremendous difference in how I felt and how my work was as a result.
So are there roles that you turned down that you said, no way, not me, I'm not going to do it, no matter how much money?
I'm going to tell you a little secret.
Oh, just among us.
I have turned down to be on The Masked Singer 3 times.
Maybe the fourth time, like the charm, right?
Since Teresa's here, I think I've had a special joy in saying that out loud for some reason. But yeah, and that's not a role, and it's not a thing. But you know, these are the choices. On the other hand, I was desperate to be on Dancing with the Stars, and they didn't want me.
That is their loss.
Yeah.
We can call somebody.
Isn't that weird? The two things, like, what's the difference? And
Right.
why is it, you know, so yeah.
Do you dance, by the way?
Well, I mean,
Well, I mean, that could be one.
I'm no Stephen Rosic, but, you know, yeah, I mean, I was into a lot of music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
That doesn't mean you can dance. It certainly doesn't. That's a non-answer. I know. That's a damning non-answer.
I got interviewed. None of us got interviewed a couple days back on what's something you're absolutely terrible at. And mine was dancing.
Oh, really?
Something that you just can't unsee.
So, like your wedding videos?
Oh god. I did come on stage during Mamma Mia here like a year or two ago, but no dancing.
Okay, kids, you got some research to do. This is for the roast. This is the end of the year roast.
So separate from roles that maybe you didn't want to have, I'm sure there were moments when the role was not offered in the way that you would have wanted. And just thinking about our, not just students, but our adults here, a lot of our lives contain rejection and disappointment, and especially in the industry you're in, right? I mean, that's
It's built into it, yeah.
whether it's Dancing with the Stars or whatever it is, right? I'm just wondering how do you help us and think about advice you give to our students? Like, how do you work through that disappointment when it comes sometimes rapid fire and often?
Yes, and I thank you for asking that because it's real. And I do kind of, it's a truth that I wanted to be on Dancing with the Stars and they didn't want me. But in the scheme of things, that was not some great disappointment like some part I really wanted to have. I do actually keep them in two very different camps. The work that I do as an actor, that I take pretty seriously, and that I want to be doing something authentic and as well as resonant when I'm doing it. And that's another thing that's more like a job, that what I felt sounded like it would be really fun, and et cetera, et cetera. So those are two different things. But it is the thing that was said to me when I was a high school student at a Q&A, about being an actor and what kind of advice would you give to an actor, that I give myself, and that I remember, and this my main source of resilience is my passion for it. In other words, in those Q&As, what was always said and what continues to be said is, you mustn't do it if you don't have to do it. It's not worth it. It's too difficult. It requires a lot of determination and rejection, and you have to want to do it so badly that you're able to take the hit. I just got a big ass tattoo.
Oh.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
And I was a good friend of mine who is a tattoo artist, who is an emerging, great, wonderful artist, and he's starting out, and I have a couple of paintings of his and stuff like that, and I said, I want to have this experience with you. I want you to do something really big on me, and then let's like promote it on social media and all that stuff. And as we're doing it, it took 8 hours, and what he said is, he told me that there's a way that you can do this now, where an anesthesiologist comes to the tattoo studio, puts you out, and you can have a whole full body tattoo like 16 hours later. No, not 16 hours later, but hours later you wake up and there's a tattoo that wasn't there before. And we thought that seemed so weird, right? And he says, yeah, you know what, you gotta earn it. You gotta earn it, and it hurts. And yet, then you have this thing, and you kind of walk through the fire to get it. And that's kind of how I feel about the joy and the exhilaration of this craft and this opportunity and this responsibility of telling story. I feel like what comes with it is a lot of stuff, like the preparation, even just rehearsal, preparation, mental focus, It involves your whole body. You have to be a healthy person. You have to be physically healthy. You have to be mentally and emotionally healthy. There's a lot that comes with it, more than most people think it does. If you're really doing a high level of work and you're doing work that is meaningful. If you're Meryl Streep, for example, it's all everything. And I think that is the thing that kind of, I know this is pretentious, but it's a little bit of this sense of nobility of being a person that instigates thought and feeling. You're there to be a storyteller, and that makes you an instigator of thought and feeling. That responsibility and that pleasure and that gift, privilege, is worth whatever it is that you have to go through. You can see the beginning in my conversation about this, why people think actors are crazy. And there's a little truth to that, because you could take it really far in one direction or another. Like actors that are super method about things and actually get drunk when they're supposed to be drunk and all that. But I do believe that that's part of what gets me through it. Because I will say, it's super hard. I'm not gonna lie to you. It can be really painful, and you want to, your mind can play a lot of tricks on you, your self-esteem can play a lot of tricks on you, and you have to be really strong to be able to do that.
Do you find yourself being a perfectionist at all?
Oh yeah, I like working it out until everyone else is so over you that you're really testing everybody's patience. But the devil is in those details to me. I really like that, and you often find yourself working with like-minded people who do also like to do that, and that can be really fun too.
So a question a student asked that I wanted to share with you. So when you think about maybe not even just shows or movies that you've acted in, but just in general, what is your favorite movie or show, either that you've been a part of or that you enjoy watching?
I saw a movie that came on TV 2 nights ago, and I have a friend named Raymond who is a cinephile and a big movie fan. And I always remember that when people ask me this question, I never have an answer. But I texted Raymond, I said, Raymond, I'm watching my favorite movie. I think this is my favorite movie. And it's a kind of an surprising answer, because it's not considered one of the great movies at all. It's a movie called Galaxy Quest.
There seems to be some recognition around it.
Now, you'll understand, you've known me for half an hour now.
Right.
So you won't surprise you that a movie that celebrates the pain of being an actor and the strangeness of the complications of fame and the notion of the lack of control you have over what fans are, what your relationship to fans are. I mean, I didn't realize what I thought of this movie. When I first saw it, I thought it was hilarious. I loved it. Yeah. And then now I look at it and I'm so incredibly, I think it's hilarious, but I'm also really moved by it. I'm really moved by a lot of first of all, there's not a bad actor in that movie. It's an incredible cast. And it's an incredible screenplay. Yeah. Do you know this movie?
I do, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I love that movie.
I love, by the way, I think you just gave a whole group of us permission to enjoy movies. Sometimes when you ask people what's their favorite movie,
you want to say Casablanca.
There's an air of pretension around it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Casablanca. And my other favorite movies, they're really silly movies. I mean, my other favorite, I love Blades of Glory. I love 9 to 5.
That's a classic, right?
Yeah.
Do you watch the movies you've been in?
Yes, I do, yeah. I mean, I don't watch them over and over again. But yeah, I do. Yeah.
So when you think about there have been your works, whether it's Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, Father, Bride, the ones that have probably a broader global reach that more people have seen, and there are other works that maybe fewer people have seen. Is there a work or works that this is the one I really want? For people who don't know me, this is the one I want them to see. This is what I want to be most either remembered for or people to really understand about me.
Yes. Yeah, there are 2 dates, right?
Yes.
Who knows what can happen.
Sure.
Well, like I said, just a very brief story. I love telling this story. Maybe it's not that interesting, so I'll try to tell the short version. this scene at the very end of season 4, which was towards the end of Mr. Robot, is my favorite scene I've ever done in anything. And it is a scene, and the reason why is because we did this huge table reading of the whole season where we have 2 days. We read the first 5 episodes in the first day, and we read the second 5 episodes. So we learn what's happening in the season all in 2 days. And we're sworn to secrecy and all of that stuff. And on the second day, on the 10th episode, or yeah, the 10th episode, something like that, 10th out of 12. Yeah, I had this huge scene, you know, like kind of like flipping ahead while the other actors are doing their scenes, kind of flipping ahead. I'm like, oh my God, I've got a huge, they give you the script you're reading it cold completely. And I go, oh my gosh, there's a huge scene here. And I read the scene and I was so excited about it and so thankful for it. And then I realized, this was in January, that we were shooting the scene in June. And the one thing that I had never experienced before is that much of a lead time and that much time potentially to prepare for it. And when you, for example, the process of being in a play, the rehearsal process is a 4-week rehearsal process. You're working on the material every day for 4 weeks before you even go into the theater, tech, and then do the rest of the technical parts and put it all together. On a TV show, you do not do anything close to that at all. You walk in on the day and you shoot the scene on the day. So whatever you're bringing in with you on that day is what is, and like I said, you have to be in the right mood and the wind has to be blowing in the right direction and all that stuff. And so I conducted an experiment, which was, I'm going to learn this now in February. And I'm going to do it every day like I was in a play. And it was like a 7 or 10 minute scene with Rami Malek. And I did it every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. When I got on that set in June, I had never felt like that on a set before. I knew anything could have happened and I was able to roll with it. I was so immersed in it. I was so able to just do it, and I could do it differently every single time. It was spectacularly powerful for me.
Sure, yeah.
And now when I watch it, I think I wouldn't change a thing about it. Most things you go, oh, okay, whatever, here and there. And then the other movie that I did that I loved working on and that I loved the opportunity of doing and I loved the material of and I loved the character of was this movie that not a lot of people saw called Focus. It was in there a little bit with Will Smith and Margot Robbie. And I loved that week that I spent with Will Smith and Margot Robbie and these two wonderful directors and the part that they wrote that I got to play in. And I love that. Those two things feel perfect to me, actually. But nothing else does. I mean, everything else you think, oh God, if I had just a little here and a little there, or looked different, or who knows what, there's something.
Yeah. So we talked about some of the dramatic roles. I'd love to talk a little bit more for a moment, and pretty soon we'll bring Teresa up on stage too. So yeah. Nora from Queens, we actually asked him to put a clip up from your role from Nora from Queens. Do we have that?
Oh, really? Oh boy. No voiceover though, right?
No voiceover, promise. No AI.
Mother was in labor for like 37 hours. You clung onto her uterus like the thing. It was so gross, man. I threw up on the nurse.
Ew.
You know, the baby comes out, it's not all clean. There's all this stuff all over it. It looks like the inside of a Pop-Tart. And then she comes up.
So, I will never look at Pop-Tarts in the same way.
I was in labor for like 30.
So, my question for you, just watching that and thinking about the range of roles, what is easier or maybe even more enjoyable for you, comedy or drama?
Well, it depends. You know, it just depends on what it is. You know, like a good comedy is way better than a bad drama, right? so that was a memorable day and a memorable show that I love doing and have such affection for and such special place in my heart for because of a lot of things that came together and some of the new people that I met doing it. And the freedom of kind of going rogue every once in a while to try to kind of see what is there inside you that can, you know, that's what improvisation is kind of about, is like turning off the filter, actually, what it is. Kind of turning off your filter. The filter that with Sam Esmail, who created Mr. Robot, I wasn't sanctioned to have. So here's a a working environment that's considerably different and allows for and embraces contribution or collaboration. And there's nothing better than that, than waiting to look at Teresa's face afterwards and say, what is that?
Right. I think it's, in my mind, extraordinarily hard to be funny and be funny for a variety of audiences. And so when you think about some of those funny books, how did you get to that place where you, and actually, first of all, how do you know what's funny? Like when you read something, do you get it? Or does someone tell you like, no, this is going to play with this audience or that audience?
It is a mystery, right? It does feel like such a mystery. And I guess leaning into it as a mystery and not being worried about not knowing is part of the key to it. Just kind of trusting your own sense of humor. Yeah. We only have our own sense of humor to gauge everything by. And I did not struggle, but I did process for many years what it meant to be a funny person. I would kind of observe funny people and go, oh, I wish I was like that. I wish I was that person at the dinner table who made people laugh. And then I kind of demystified it over the years, where I just thought, well, this is funny to me, so I'm saying it. And then people would laugh, and then I thought, well, I guess then it's really funny. And I've come a long way in that process of trying to examine what it meant to be funny and what the definition of funny actually was, and to be prepared to be wrong, to be prepared to be like, no, that's not funny, BD, that's not funny, stop it, and go, okay, well, I thought it was funny, but I thought it was funny. You know, that's always going to happen. And the one thing that's great about a show like North from Queens is that the camera just keeps rolling and people say the most absurd things. And at the end of it, when the great editors put it all together, there's some really inspired things that are able to be put together that you can't do in a play. You can't do that. And I think that's a good thing.
So I'm curious, and this is, we're living in a time too where funny can stray in all different kinds of directions. You talked a little bit earlier about cancellation, right?
Yeah.
And so living within these boundaries of, there's some people who want to use humor as a vehicle for mean-spirited stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's a time where we worry that there's the death of comedy because if you say anything that's going to offend somebody, then you might be at risk of cancels. How do you live in that space? Or maybe you don't.
How do we all live in that space? And how do we negotiate it? And as either a comedy maker or as a comedy audience member, how do you? One of the shows that I directed in New York was the off-Broadway show of Judy Gold's show. She's a stand-up comic, and her show is called Yes, I Can Say That, and it's about free speech and comics, and about the unique place that comics have in pushing the envelope of what we think of as appropriate or whatever, and that there, in her mind, is a real safe space that can occur where you're supposed to know she's joking, and you're supposed to know that she's going to get everybody. So if she gets targets a group that is vulnerable, don't worry, it'll be your turn soon. And I think she has some really keen and profound things actually to say about how the mind works and what the brakes we put on things and why we put brakes on things. She recognized also a queer person. She recognizes the importance of not harming people, not hurting people. Sure. And she herself really skates a fine line on pushing it far, how far she can push a group of people. And I think it behooves us all to kind of look at this and I think a lot of confusion that comes in the nuances of talking about tricky things. Like we talked about a couple of tricky things earlier with the other students about people being uncomfortable about the casting of, say, a black actress to play Ariel the Mermaid, right? And me saying, well, you know, she's a mermaid. and that kind of takes the air out of the tires for a lot of people who were very uptight about that because they felt something encroached on them when the part was given to an African American actor. And that we got to examine, where does that come from? Why do you feel that way? What is happening in our world that's making you feel that way? It's really not about Halle Bailey at all. It's more about us and what we're going through and what we're doing to each other and how we are or are not marginalizing each other. That creates these questions. And so I feel like in comedy, that same thing is true, which is that we all got to kind of learn. People on threads, and when I'm getting into these knockdown, drag-out fights with these people on threads, they love to say, well, obviously this has pushed a button for you, and so maybe you need to talk to your therapist about that. And they love to play the card of, oh, it's you and you're whatever. But there's a truth to the fact that we're all responding to everything based upon our own frame of reference, our own identity, our own pain, and our own history. And that's a part of what creates our reactions to things. And we don't blame, I'm not into blaming people and saying, well, that's you, that's on you. But it's complicated. It's much more complicated than people allow it to be. And I think that has to do with things like us and theming a situation like the election. Not to get too deep into kind of like taking sides in the election, but there's a divisiveness, and the divisiveness tends to be devoid of empathy or an understanding of the perspective, the complications of why people are saying the things that they're saying and why they're believing certain things and why they're choosing to agree with certain things or believe certain things. Why are you doing that? Well, there's something going on with you that isn't a blame thing. It's an actual valid explanation of something that's going on in your community or in your family or in your heart that is making you think this. And if we could get to the root of that, the why of why you're thinking that this is better than that, because that sure doesn't look good to me, but why does it look good to you? Why does that look good to you? If we could get to the root of why it really has made you feel that way, I think we'd be further along than just kind of going back and forth saying, no, you're not wrong. You're not right, I'm right. That doesn't really do us any good.
And the back and forth is exhausting.
Yes.
And the absence of empathy.
Counterproductive.
Yeah, and whether it's social media or any other media of all kinds, right?
Yeah.
That constant back and forth, I need to show that I can't be right, if you must be wrong for me to be right.
Yeah. And it's reductive. It's not really real.
Right.
That's not how it works, actually.
Do you find yourself getting sucked into the social media? Like, I'm wondering, I'm having this image right now of you just doing this for like a couple hours at night.
Oh,
Yeah.
I recently gave myself the gift of hiring a part-time assistant. And he really has helped me tremendously getting myself here with you guys and dealing with the agency and with Thayer and all of that stuff and getting me here and all that stuff. And I've recently given him the passcodes to all the social media. And he helps me generate the social media, he helps me shoot it, and we edit it together and we do it. He came with me to the DNC. Oops, I shouldn't have said that. He came with me to a convention. And we shot content and all that stuff. And every once in a while I'll get a text from him. BD, are you on Instagram right now? Do you maybe want to take a break? He's the sweetest and the most non-confrontational and the most effective for me person, but yes is the answer.
Yeah, fair enough. 24-hour rule, right?
Well, I'm just as bad as Donald Trump. I'll be at 3 o'clock in the morning in a kind of outrage about something, and I'll either buy something I don't want, or I will be yelling at somebody on the internet. They're probably in Guam or something, in some place.
Before I invite Teresa to the stage in a moment, thinking about the progress that's been made when you think about representation in your industry and for Asian Americans, for the LGBTQ plus community. I mentioned earlier, a number of our students, they were born as late as 2014. So the world they've occupied for the last 10 years, our students in middle school, they haven't seen a world that you and I and other people have seen. They don't know that history. And so when you think about something you want you think those students need to know about how far we've come, and also maybe how far we have yet to go? I would love to sort of get your perspective on that.
As Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, my fervent wish is that you don't need to know, you will never be chastised by me for not knowing something that happened before you. But you must know that something happened before you. And that must lead you to what I hope is a curiosity about history, about your foreparents, about the origin story of anything, whether it be civil rights or AIDS or any World War II, the Holocaust, a lack of representation, blackface. The list goes on, and it is rich. History is rich, history is resonant, and history does apply to us in the moment that we're living in. It's directly related to everything that explains who we are, how we've come to be where we are, and what we might become. So it behooves us, and this is where we're in an educational context. History is taught, and history is taught for that reason. I mean, I know you know this, and I know it's obvious, but I think maybe you might agree that there is a sense sometimes that people forget that something happened before.
Yes.
And that reminder, or the ability for someone to self-remind themselves, oh yeah, something before might be the reason why I'm asking this question now, or about to criticize this thing. Not sure what, specifically I mean, but I think that's just a fundamental thing. That's just a basic thing that I wish to be implemented as a general principle to live one's life.
Agreed. Why don't we invite Teresa
Yes.
to join us on stage for a little bit of inside industry.
Insider Q&A. I had some questions prepared,
Did I
but
ask
really,
the
I think you
questions?
asked them all,
Oh, no.
so I don't really have anything. No. Well, first of all, the clip was really funny. I don't know, Dee, if you were able to see it, but you're actually wearing a hat in it, and the reason you were wearing a hat was because you actually had a wig on, and I think you were coming from Mr. Robot that day.
Yeah, it was probably, yes. Yeah. That was, the whole wig story, the Wally wig story is it's
An
a
ongoing
three-part
saga.
miniseries.
Yes, we had a lot of wigs.
Yeah, we had a lot of wigs, and we had a lot of discussion about the wigs and whether there should be a wig. And then finally, when the wig was, there was a whole season when I actually wore my hair like it was a wig. Yeah, that was
Yes,
interesting.
we actually
Can
had
you make
to
it look more like a wig?
we had to put you in a lot of hats, which is why
Yes.
you were wearing a hat.
Yeah, I remember that.
But first of all, we met in 2018 when you signed on to play Wally.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of memories from the time we were there. We did make you eat cat food, but it wasn't real cat food.
No.
There was a time
You're
where
giving it away.
there was a time you got to sing with Michael Bolton.
Oh.
You got to act with a pigeon one time. So
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what were some of your favorite moments? And I apologize for the pigeon.
My favorite moments, unquestionably, are whenever all four of us were at the table. When Nora and Bowen and Lori and I were all at the table together, whether that be a brief, there was very specific moments when this was able to happen. And the first time it happened was in the pilot, or the first episode, we were in that restaurant. And Bowen said during the shooting of it, we're waiting between shots or whatever, and Bowen said, I've never done this before, where I was sitting with a Chinese family and we're talking about things that mean something that I understand. Chinese food that I don't have to explain it to anybody or anything. And there was a shorthand, and there was a sense of family, and there was a sense of camaraderie and shared experience and shorthand that was great. And I knew instantly what he meant. And then we kind of reconnected with that, and whenever we were all together again, because we're such a kind of motley crew, right? We're so multi-generational, and Lori has her energy, and and Nora has her energy. Everybody's, so unique, and I think that's one of the good things about, great things about our chemistry. So it was those times. I mean, I loved Jennifer Esposito. I loved every scene with her. I loved the existence of her. I loved the relationship. I loved the way that you wove the reality of Nora's actual father's relationship into this fictional one. That was tricky, and it was deftly done, I think. I loved, those were the main things, I think.
Well, I actually want to ask you about playing a real character, one who actually came to set and was drinking a beer watching you. What was that like? Did you, obviously you met Wally, Nora's real dad. You did get some, I think, acting or accent lessons.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, well, the thing, it's always, I've done it very few times. I think the one other time that was noteworthy to me was when I was in this HBO movie called And the Band Played On, which was about the discovery of the AIDS virus. And I played a person who actually lived and got to know them and met them. They bore no resemblance to that person in the movie, but you felt a sense of, well, God, I don't want them to be mad or upset by anything I'm doing. You don't want to make a false move. So that's a little bit inhibiting. It makes you feel like you just have to be kind of middle of the road and nice. On the other hand, he had a warmth, and Nora, as you remember, was extremely like, why don't do what, you really, you be you, do you, I don't want you to pretend to imitate him or anything like that. She had a great, interesting, kind of contradictory way of dealing with me and him. When out of one side of her mouth, she would say, you got to do whatever you want, and you really, I don't want you to try to imitate him. And then she would come onto this and say, why are you wearing that? You can't wear that. You would never wear that. And then we would all go scrambling around to find another shirt or something like that. And that was really interesting too. So I was always aware of her reverence for him, her wanting to get it right for him, and not wanting to embarrass or misrepresent him, and then her wanting to serve me as an artist, as like a creative person. And that was kind of tricky. I remember the very beginning, the impetus for it, even the whole way he spoke, was this really short video she showed me of him. She said, oh, here he is, this is what he's like. And he had a leather jacket on, and he was saying, what was the line, Teresa?
Was it in the car?
Yeah. No, yeah, it was in the car. He was like, I didn't live in the 70s, I was the 70s. Something like that, right? You remember?
Yeah.
And you just kind of, in one sentence, you kind of got all of his essence, right? I didn't do much more than just take that and add a little Ray Romano to it. That was all there was to it. So yeah, but it's an interesting aspect of it, is that it can't be taken lightly, actually. Oh, this person is real. You can't just do anything you want, no matter what anybody says. And then you do want to try to find your own creativity within that. And that is a dance.
And you actually got to direct an episode in season 2, which was your directorial debut in television. Obviously,
That's
you
right.
directed in theater before, but tell us about that.
Well, okay, so that is, I think the main challenge of that was directing scenes that you're in. So I had no problem or challenge kind of doing the directing thing with Nora and the other actors and putting things together, whatever that was. And then as soon as I was in the scene, I thought, wow, this is really schizo and hard and self-conscious. And I remember they gave me an iPad that had the monitor on it, and I was on the couch or whatever, and I'd have to put it away and hide it, and then the cameras would roll and we'd do the scene, and there's something kind of not natural about that. Really tricky, really a little weird feeling about it. But I loved it. I loved that episode. I loved little Alan Kim, who played little Wally, and he was just great, that kid from Minari.
Yep.
And so yeah, it was a really great experience. I have really fond memories of that experience. And another great Wally wig was in that that show?
We went through so many wigs on that
Yeah.
show. Yeah, there was
Oh,
grandma
the one
wigs,
we-
Nora wigs.
And Nora wigs, right.
Yeah.
They're all the Nora wigs. There should be a Nora wig supercut.
I think there actually was a sort of Instagram filter or something that you could wear all the Nora
Oh, yeah,
wigs.
yeah.
But that's for another day. So writing, acting, directing, if you were to choose only one
Ooh.
that you could only do for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
I think it would be directing. I think it would be at this, being who I am now, and like, I can say that I have done a lot of acting, so that helps me to be able to make that decision. And I think that the directing is a real, a way to express yourself. I don't feel, as an actor in television and film, that I'm really expressing anything personal. But I think as a director, you can imprint your point of view, your design sensibility, your taste, your fashion sense. I mean, all kinds of things on all characters, on all aspects of the production, design, and the costumes and the lighting and everything. You are facilitating all of these different aspects of it. And so I do long to work in a project that kind of celebrates all of those crafts, not just an episode of our show that was super, and I did have that kind of input, but in something really, visual and juicy.
Okay, so same question, but because you've been in TV, movies, and theater,
Mhm.
just pick one.
I would pick the theater, yeah. I started out in the theater. The theater is a personal experience where a relationship is built with the audience, with the energy of the audience's attention and engagement. And so it is, and as a human being in a live situation, I'm processing that, and that processing is becoming part of my performance. The other thing is extremely gratifying because it can be perfect or made to be perfect, but it isn't as personal. It's not as fun, and it's also not as much of an actor's medium that the stage is. Like nobody gets to edit me when I'm on stage, and somebody can butcher me in a television or a movie project.
Well, they say the theater is the actor's medium, television is the writer's medium, and film is the director's medium.
I think
That's
that's
what
true,
they say.
yeah.
What they say in the biz, I guess.
Yeah.
Last question. I guess this is sort of an inside Hollywood Q&A, but you don't actually live in Hollywood. You live in New York. Can you speak to that? Especially, I had one of the students earlier today ask me about, do you have to be in LA to make it in the business?
I have chosen never to live in LA the whole time that I lived in LA at the time that I was in Karate Kid 2, that little clip where that was 1984 or 1985 maybe, and I was just starting out, and then eventually my Broadway debut came when I was living in LA and I auditioned long distance in other words, I flew to New York to audition for this Broadway play, just for the chance of being up for it, not because I thought I would get it. And then I did get it. And that caused me to move to New York, and then it caused me to stay in New York since then. I lived briefly in LA for the time that I was in Margaret's show, All American Girl, for maybe 6 to 8 months. And then I lived there another 6 to 8 months for a show that I did called Awake in the early 2010s. And I've never enjoyed it. I've never loved it. Of course, you can guess all the things that one would love about LA, and I loved all those things. But in general, its interface, the way it interfaces with the business, the lifestyle, and the way it interfaces with the business isn't for me necessarily. And the eclectic, kind of wild energy of New York and the cultural life of New York appeals to me. And the East Coast energy appeals to me. The seasons appeal to me. A lot of things. So to answer that question, I would say, no, you don't, I guess. I do question sometimes, would I have more? And that is the thing that my therapist warns me never to say, like, don't compare. Don't complain and don't compare. But don't compare, yourself to other people. It's never healthy to do that. And questioning, what if? I love what I'm doing. I love raising my son and having raised my son in New York. I love the career that I've had to have while I'm in New York. And I feel like I'm just in a potentially fruitful time. And so I'm looking forward to what continuing to live in New York can bring. Yeah.
I love that message, by the way. Comparison is a thief of joy. We talk about that a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
In a moment, I'm going to invite those who are interested in asking questions to line up by the microphones that are along the sort of center aisle over there. That Mr. Brooks and some of us will bring over here as well. But I want to make sure I get to ask you one or two more questions before we invite people to get up. But please give some thought to that.
This is great.
And so I want to make sure.
Oh, you're warning.
I'm warning you. Yes. So please get ready to, if you're going to come up, please come up to the microphone and stand in line, and we'll have an opportunity for you to ask a bunch of questions. But a couple questions sort of while people are getting into line that I wanted to ask you. I think you touched on this a little bit too, but what keeps you growing as an actor at this stage in your career, and maybe more broadly, what keeps you growing as a person at this stage of life and career?
I think I have two answers. One is that creatively, I feel that the hunger of wanting things that I don't have is healthy. Actually, is motivating. Is an opportunity for a lot of creativity and generating ideas and creating new opportunities. And then as a kind of general, as a human being kind of answer, not creatively, I think that I really have I've really been, I can't be the only person who has felt a frustration or a despair over the divisiveness of the world, and I have felt motivated to participate in whatever I can do as a conduit to conversation, again, using visibility if possible to create that conversation. But that is motivated by something that's not terribly positive. It's motivated by my perception that people have stopped listening to one another, maybe, or something. I don't know if I really have the words to say what it is that motivated it. But I feel different, is what I'm saying. Okay. I feel different than I did when I was a younger person. I feel like this is, in many ways, an incredible time to be alive. It's a kind of a make or break moment for humanity in some ways. And I feel scared and alarmed by it, but also invigorated and challenged by it. And so I think it's a great time to be alive.
If I can ask you one last unfair one-word question.
Oh boy.
Yeah. If there is a word
Sex.
I'll edit that one out.
Okay. If there's one word, and maybe it's the same word, if there's one word that would describe what you feel like you most stand for. So, maybe a different word.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, this is a good question, but it's not easy to answer like immediately. I don't have the immediate Galaxy Quest answer. But I would say, because it's a trap, man. Mr. F, it's a trap. Because you can be so corny and pretentious, or you can be too earnest, or you can be too flippant. But I would say, I kind of want to say alternative. I kind of want to say whatever the thing is that is not normal. Like part of my everyday cadence is looking at something and trying to bend it, or trying to find a different way of looking at it, or trying to make a choice that others would not make, not just to be different, but to try to feel what that feels like, or to examine what might be positive about taking a different road. So that's not enough one-word answer. It's a good. What is the word for that? You know, alternative. I would say, you know, like that. The different thing. Abnormal.
Thank you for answering another question. Okay, so I'd love to open it up to those who may have questions.
Anybody?
I think we've got one coming over here.
They're all going to come running down when you say it's time is up.
What was your favorite movie to work in?
Oh, great. I think my favorite movie was this movie that I did with Will Smith called Focus. I loved every second of it. Will Smith was odd as a fruitcake. It's no surprise, right? Margot Robbie was unbelievably lovely and wonderful and funny. And the two directors were great, and I loved the characters that I was playing. I also did a very weird movie with Val Kilmer in the late 90s called The Salton Sea, and I loved making that movie too. I think those are the two movies, yeah, when it comes to movies. Thanks.
Who was your favorite actor to work with in Karate Kid?
I'm still old friends with Tamara Tomita, who played the leading lady in that movie and was kind of discovered on an international talent search to find a real Japanese person. And she is incredible, has gone on to have a really great career. And she was the lead girl in that movie. I didn't I will say just basically, in that movie, there was a scene that took place in a festival that I was also in, and they needed some folk dancers, and a group of mine that were friends of mine that were in a theater company, all got together. You know, they hired somebody to put us all together, and they choreographed a little folk dance routine. And that was me working with people I knew on a big fancy movie, and so there was a real nice group there's a nice sense of working with your friends. So those were the actors that I would say I loved working with most in that movie, because that was my main function, was being that boy in that one line, having that one line, and being in this folk dancing scene.
Like, I know this can happen to some actors, like, they get so into, like, their position, what they're playing. Like, how do you, like, separate for, like, being the actor and taking off your hat and being, like, you instead? Like, you're not getting lost into being.
Very good question. I have experienced the importance of that, or the phenomenon of that, a lot in my life. The first one that comes to mind is that I was on this show on HBO called Oz, which took place in a maximum security prison. And it was a super violent show, and it was a show in which the characters did terrible things to each other every week. Depravity was, I've done a lot of things with depravity, but depravity was a big part of the vibe of that show. And so you would be on set, and there would be something horrible happen. And there was also never more laughter on any set that I've ever been on, including Norfolk, Queens. It was like a release that needed to happen between takes or something like that, that allowed people to remind themselves that it wasn't real. And so I think you develop within yourself a survival instinct or a defense mechanism that allows you to intentionally differentiate these things so that you don't get lost ever. And of course, when you're saying the lines is when it's appropriate to be going down deep into whatever emotion that you're feeling, and then the camera stops rolling, or the rehearsal is over, or the scene is over, and then there's a natural sense that your average mentally healthy person can make the differentiation. So it happens kind of naturally, I think.
Hello, my name is Tyler, and I'm a senior at Thayer. This is kind of like an important time, because after high school, there's college, post-grad, you know, kind of choosing which path that I'm going to take. And so my question to you is kind of it's kind of vague, could you have predicted where you are now from a younger self? How did you take all the decisions up until this point? just kind of like roll with it? Did you have a set thing that you wanted to do to become the person you are now, or could you speak on that?
Thank you, and I appreciate you asking this because I do have I think, a somewhat constructive answer to the question. One thing I will say is I did picture it in a very general way, meaning when I was in high school, I knew very strongly that I wanted to be an actor. I didn't know what kind of an actor, where I would be an actor, whether it would be a Broadway actor or whatever. In general terms, though, I knew this idea of using character and acting technique to be a conduit to a writer's story and hopefully their ideas was what I wanted to do. How that came about is it was not a normal necessarily a path, but I'm so happy to have the opportunity to say that I believe that a big part of the challenge that I faced was that I didn't have great counseling. Like, I didn't have someone who said, oh, I see who you are. You need to go to one of these 20 schools where the acting training is of a professional level, and you need to start, as soon as you discover this, to make sure your grades are ready for you to get into one of those. I didn't have that preparation, or I was a little clueless about it. And so then I kind of floundered. I went to my local state university, and I struggled there, as I told you, and or did I say that here? Or did I not? I did, okay. I've been in so many Q&As today. I don't regret, but I wish that someone, that even my own drama teacher could have helped me place me in a better way. Now, what I'm thrilled about is that I think you have that here. And I think that is, of all the great things you have here, that is a thing that you need not worry about. But I do think it's something that if I were to make my, insert myself into this, I would say it's something you can trust. You have to trust the people that know about how to guide you, and you don't have to listen to everybody, and you have to follow your heart. But in my life, it's never served me to think that somebody who actually did know better than me didn't. I was a little maybe cocky earlier on, not in this particular issue, but in general. And so, not that I sense that that is about you, but I will say that I don't know. I just think I just want to say that preparation is a map that you need to have great agency in, and also collaboration is helpful.
Did you have a backup plan? Did you ever think, if it doesn't work, I'm going to be a dentist or
I didn't. I had a backup plan, which was that if it didn't work out, I would do something else.
Okay.
But I didn't know what it was. I wasn't super specific.
Okay.
I was doing a lot of one of the things that my teacher insisted that is I designed the poster for the school plays. And so graphic design has always been a thing that I've always loved, and that would have probably been a thing that I then trained for if I were to go down that path.
There's still time.
I know.
There is still plenty of time.
And there's so many more fonts now. It's so great.
I think you have another question.
So I'm curious about your time on Law and Order, and I have two questions. One, thinking of the number of episodes per season, and then the number of seasons you were on. How did you keep it fresh, exciting, interesting? And then also there's so many amazing Broadway actors as well as screen actors who were guest stars, and I was wondering if there are any particular highlights.
Oh gosh, yes. To be super honest and not negative at all, just is a fact, is that eventually I left the show because it became kind of the same for me. I wasn't on it for 14 years, I was on it for 11 years, but 11 years, trust me, is plenty. And halfway through I started to think, oh, I see, I get it now. it's not really gonna change. It's gonna be, where is he? Oh, here he comes. What's he saying? Oh, he said that. Good advice. See you later. And, rinse and repeat. And that was great for the time that it was. And then I got itchy and I wanted to do something else. And I made a huge decision to actually leave. Because as you know, it's still on. And that was in 2011 and it's still on. And so, but it was absolutely the right thing for me to do. And I think the thing that was always fresh for me was this information that was always like, I would be like, this is the thing, really? People do this? And it was a learning thing for me. We had a wonderful showrunner who was also a physician and wrote the character to bring a medical perspective to the show that hasn't been on since I left. And I appreciated that, and I could always turn to him for the confirmation or the understanding or the pronunciation or whatever of what this thing was. And I learned a fair amount doing that and enjoyed that. So that's kind of what I would call the freshness of it. I was a big Carol Burnett fan, and I just loved having a one-on-one scene with Carol Burnett, holding Carol Burnett's hand and all that. And it never got better than that for me. And Wonder Woman, Linda Carter, and Robin Williams, and John Ritter, and just so many people, like you say. Some more memorable than others, but those are the top 5, I would say, that I can think of. My good friend Stephanie March was on the show for 4 or 5 seasons, and you make friends and you keep them, and that's a really nice thing. Remember where I was when, kind of that kind of thing. But thank you for your question. It was, as you probably know, it's like the key to a certain kind of visibility in your life as an actor is something you must always be grateful for, no matter how tedious you thought it was or whatever, And so I'm super grateful to Dick Wolf and to the whole franchise for affording me that opportunity, and never want to make it sound like I'm saying anything bad about it or anything like that, because it was really, really great for me. Oh, the other thing was that I lived in New York in 2000. My son was born. I didn't want to leave New York, and so I had a contract. Oh, and the other thing is that, we shoot like 10 episodes of Norfolk Queens, and we shoot 23 episodes of Law and Order. It is a job. It's a great contract. You really, they don't do contracts like this so much anymore. And it's a harder life as an actor because of it, because you have to freelance a lot more. But it ended up being a big part of your year, like the whole school year was when you were shooting.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm wondering, working on Charlie Brown, was it difficult making a character so well loved, your own?
So what?
Well loved.
Because the character is well loved by others?
Yeah.
I think I like that. I mean, I was as fond of him as everyone else. So maybe if I wasn't, that would be hard. But I loved him. I always loved him. And I always related to him. And I fell immediately in alignment with him. And I had a different point of view than most people in that show. And I made him more like the animated version of him than the other actors in that show did. I just wanted to kind of honor that original performance by those wonderful child actors who did those specials. And so I made him a little bit like them, that they were. But that wasn't hard. It was a great time. That was also the time that I was deciding that I was going to be a parent. And so there's a lot of memories tied into me from that. And it was great. It's a great experience.
I think we've got time for a couple more.
Hello. So, you talked a little bit about your role as an activist, and I'm wondering, are there any instances that you remember of where your role as an activist impacted some part of your career as an actor?
Is that Arthur?
Yes.
Hey, did it impact my, of course it has to, the answer has to be yes, and then I have to try to come up with an example. You know what, it's become kind of intertwined for me. And I think what you're saying is, did one affect the other? Is that basically kind of what you're saying? We were working on Nora from Queens into and through the pandemic. What was the relationship of the date, the timeline?
We shot the first season in 2019, but then the second season we shot in 2021.
Yeah.
So it was masks, everything.
Masks and everything,
face shields.
Yeah, and in 2021, we were deep in Stop Asian Hate, and we were talking about Stop Asian Hate, and it was becoming a thing in that time period. And that is when they turned to Asian American people in the media and visible Asian people to discuss the issue, to make public service announcements. And we were on a show that was an Asian show. You know, there's something very specific and unique and wonderful about working, like I said before, about the dinner table, like working with other people of whom you share whatever it is that you share. And so there was a sense for me of a kind of shared grief about the whole thing. That's all I can say. It didn't really, it did. Then there was COVID itself, which played a role in the show. And so our feelings about COVID got written into the show, and our relationship to our elders with regards to COVID, and my own kind of fear about my own mother and where she was, what COVID was going to, threaten in my mother's life, got kind of written right into the show. So there was, this isn't exactly what you're talking about, because you're talking about activism and things. But my first answer is that, as an Asian American person, we were all called upon to participate in trying to bring a voice to Stop Asian Hate movement, and that brought us together in a certain way.
We have a question over here.
Hi. Uh-oh.
No.
Yeah, here we go.
Thank you. First, I'm Olivia. I'm a history teacher here, so I thank you very much for your comment about the importance of studying history. Oh my gosh, that was just so eloquently and well put. I have two questions. First, are there any genres you'd like to explore that you haven't explored as much of? You have a very wide range already, but I'm curious if you're interested in getting into, and is there any directors you'd like to work with in particular?
Oh, I'm sure there's tons of directors I'd love to work with. And I have to try to remember who they are. I mean, well, I would say that, well, first of all, the genres. Let's see the thing about the genres. Well, I grew up loving movie musicals, and I love Broadway musicals, and I have done a couple of Broadway musicals, and so anything that touched on that, I would love that. I would have loved to have been in Schmigadoon, actually. Yeah. And then again, be careful what you wish for, right? So I like that. I have a soft spot for musicals. And I guess that would be my answer. I have not really loved my brief brush with action movies. I don't really care that much about that. I think I actually wouldn't mind being the guy in a rom-com. That sounds weird, but I mean that would be fun, I think, to be the guy, And then the directors, gosh, who are the directors that I just adore? I'm really fond of, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's blanking on me right now. The shows that I've loved, the television shows that I've loved, I don't know who directed them, but I loved. I'm a big fan of Veep. I'm a big fan of Fleabag. I'm a big fan of a lot of the directors that we worked with on Norfolk.
You actually missed the episode that was directed by Academy Award winning The Daniels.
And that's not my fault, that's your
You
fault.
were not in that episode, I'm sorry.
Like he couldn't have like been having a dream and then it was like his dream.
Everyone else was in that episode.
Everyone else was in that episode. Yeah. No, the two guys that directed everything all everywhere, all at once, at all times, never, forever and ever, infinitum, were on Norfolk Queens, and I didn't get to work with them. But like that, those are the really interesting, more avant-garde directors. I would just love.
Try and get the last couple of student questions in. Please go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering if you, like what your favorite kind of form of media is, and if you like what's your favorite genre?
Of media, period? Of media?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm actually a big documentary fan. I love documentaries. I mean, this has nothing to do with as an actor or a performer, but I find myself most entranced and immersed by things that really happened and how a filmmaker can actually make or break that subject matter through the making of a film about it. I love that. I just recently stumbled upon this documentary, a long documentary about the film composer Ennio Morricone, and that was on Turner Classic Movies. And I watched the whole thing and I found it so moving. And the subject matter itself is the life of a world-class, famous, well-revered movie composer, but that doesn't mean the movie's gonna be good, right? That it was such a well-done movie with so many wonderful stars and filmmakers in it, all saying the most amazing, intelligent, insightful, and affectionate things about him. And then he himself talking about his own process and his own disappointments in biographical information and clips. And this wonderful thing where he would sing the thing that he invented and they would play the actual track under it as he sang it and line it up. And then they would cut to the film, the clip. It was beautifully done. I highly recommend it. But I love documentaries as a result of that freedom that a person can, and have that freedom be restricted by facts.
All right, we have our last question.
Hi, my name's Calvin Jacobs, and I was curious if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be and why?
God, I hate you. Because people always cry when you ask them that. Old people are stupid. And they would cry at questions like that. And and I would say, and I've thought about this and I have different answers to this question. I think the main obstacle for me throughout the time that I was an adolescent these two things corresponded. One of them was my growing understanding that Asian American people were invisible in the industry to which I desperately wanted to be a part. And the other one was that it was really easy to make fun of gay men in the media. And so as a person who was going into the business of wanting to be an actor, explore characters, eliminate the human condition, and all that stuff, I found myself lacking for anything to grasp onto. And so as a result, I didn't want to be a part of these two communities, which I now realize are the essence of my identity. And so I would say to him, you are great, you're perfect. The things that you think are obstacles are assets. They're gifts. They are the thing that will give you something to talk about. They are the thing that will give you something that you will want to change, to create discussions about, to write about, to act about. These will all become conduits to the things that frustrate you, or to the other side of the things that frustrate you. And so those are the two, that would be absolutely what I would say. I would say these things are exactly the opposite of what you think they are. They're not your obstacles, they are your greatest privileges. Yeah.
Such wonderful words for us to conclude this evening. We've come to the end of our time. First of all, I want to thank both of you for the gift of your talent and your humanity and your humor and what you brought to our community today. I'm going to charge all of you in the audience and those who may see this at another occasion to do three things. First, come back when we do these things again. The next Global Speaker Series, there'll be more information out there. Dr. Lisa Dumore is going to be joining us in December for a wonderful event as well. The second thing I'm going to charge all of you to do when you leave here is please contact Disney and say that this man here needs to be on Dancing with the Stars.
Yes.
So that dream can be fully realized.
Yes.
And the last thing I'll ask of all of you is please put your hands together to thank our guests for some.
Oh, but wait. Can I just say thank you? I really want to say thank you because I have been treated so warmly here and so invited with such great humanity and just such an incredible energy. Everybody, Peter and Mr. F, just this is a very special school, and I just hope that you are fully aware of the incredible gift it is to go here. I mean, from the facilities to the energy that is surrounding your education, and I don't know what you had before this guy came here, but he is the shit. He is an educational visionary, and he cares about you. And that's going to go a long way in all of your lives. And thank you so much for having me.